What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Scott and welcome to FudgeMuppet. Today I've got quite an interesting lore question to discuss, revolving around one of the strongest races in Tamriel, the Orcs. This race of beast-like people can be found in provinces all over Tamriel, however they aren't exactly prospering when compared to the other races. In this video I want to try and unravel the reasons that explain why the Orcs have not been successful and ultimately why they always lose. But what do I mean by this? Well, I'll discuss that as we go through the video, but ultimately I want to figure out why the Orcs haven't managed to settle in a province of their own by now, and why they didn't rise to power and create massive nation-states like the other races of Tamriel. The Dark Elves have Morrowind, the Argonians have Blackmarsh, and the Imperials have Cyrodiil, and so on. But where is the province of the Orcs, and why has their kingdom of Orsinium risen and fallen multiple times? There seems to be a massive lack of stability. Anyways, with all these questions asked, you might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed, or perhaps you're a lore expert and you already know the answer. I'd love to hear your theories in the comments below, especially if you can find more reasons that I didn't mention in this video. Also, if you enjoy this kind of lore-based content and want more, be sure to give the video a like. With that said, let's just dive into where it all began. The birthplace of the Orcish race. So for those of you who have watched our video on how every race was created, you'll know how the Orcs were made in great detail. But for those who don't know, here's a solid summary. So the Orcs, also known as Orsimer, were said to be elves long ago. They are assumed to come from the Aldmer, who were the original race of elves on Nirn. Aldmer, not Altmer, which is the modern-day High Elf, although they probably look more or less the same. So Orcs were Aldmer back in the Merethic era, and the Aldmer seem to be who the other elves are descended from too. Anyways, so the Aldmer were big worshippers of the Aedra, and Trinimac was a particularly important Aedra at the time, in some places even more popular than Auriel. However, there was a non-conforming group of Aldmer who followed a prophet named Veloth. Veloth spoke to his followers on behalf of the three Daedra that the Dark Elves worship, Azura, Mephala, and Boethia. They would eventually embark on a great trip to Morrowind, however another group of Aldmer obviously had problems with this. This other group were devout followers of Trinimac, and they tried to stop Veloth and his movement. Here's where things get weird. When the followers of Trinimac tried to stop Veloth, Boethia got involved and made a fool out of Trinimac, eating him whole and supposedly assuming his form and revealing lies of Trinimac's teachings regarding Lorkhan. So Boethia not only consumed Trinimac, but then shat him out as dung, turning him into Malakath, who is currently known as the Daedric Prince of the Ostracized, the Spurned, and the Bloody Oath. Veloth and his followers became the Chimer, and those followers of Trinimac who tried to stop Veloth were cursed, turned into outcasts, into the Orcs. One account actually says that Trinimac's followers rubbed his remains all over their skin, and that's what changed them. It all sounds pretty disgusting, and that's what the Orcs are considered by others. So this sets up an interesting foundation for the Orcs, and perhaps is one of the reasons they haven't risen to dominance with a nation of their own. They are a legitimately cursed race, but curses aside, here's one of the mistakes the early Orcs made, a mistake which would set them up for failure. The Orcs decided to live tribal, independent lifestyles, and they didn't all travel together in search of one new land to settle. No, instead the Orcs went to multiple places with different clusters deciding to live in various provinces, forming small villages all over Tamriel. So to me, this is definitely one of the biggest reasons why the Orcs aren't currently winning big time. They never capitalized on a big land grab and literally scattered themselves, driving their presence over the entire continent. Other groups of Aldmer on the land remained together. As you know, Veloth and his followers, the Chimer, went to Morrowind. They stuck together under one belief system and eventually were cursed to become the Dark Elves. More about that can be found in our video on how all the races were created. Another group of Aldmer went and colonized the mainland of High Rock, interbreeding with the Needs and creating a Man-Mer race which would end up being the ancestor race of the Bretons. The point I'm making here is that the Orcs simply did not stick together and go to one place. They voluntarily split apart, living as tribals, while other groups stayed together and built nations. This is a foundational factor contributing to their lack of a singular united province. This one factor not only was detrimental for the reasons mentioned so far, but becomes even more problematic down the track for another reason. You see, because the Orcs separated into groups so early on, they eventually formed differing beliefs. On a macro scale, their cultures are all very similar, however differences in things like religion did spring up. Some Orcs believed that Trinimac should still be worshipped, while others considered this blasphemy and were devout to their new cursed god, the Daedric prince Malakath. This created plenty of infighting and saw the kingdoms that they eventually did create facing a lot of problems. The Orcs had doomed themselves from the start. Their kingdom was called Orsinium, but how was it created and what happened? Well, as you know, Orcs had spread themselves all around Tamriel. One group who found themselves in Hammerfell were eventually pushed out by the Red Guards in the 874th year of the First Era. An Orcsmer warlord named Thulgeg led the Orcs and even some goblins out of Hammerfell on a massive immigration to High Rock. The Orcs, however, couldn't get past the Bankerai Pass and instead headed northeast through the Dragentail Mountains, eventually reaching the Hrothgarian Mountains. Here the Orc population would live and grow, and an Orc chieftain by the name of Torug Gro Igron would establish the city of Orsinium. To begin with, Orsinium was nothing spectacular, but as word spread to other Orcs who were scattered across Tamriel, it soon became more populated. Orsinium started to develop from a bunch of huts to a proper city, home to sturdier living structures. It seems like many of the Orcs around Tamriel liked the idea of living together, united, even though their ancestors had spread their numbers thin, and so it was that clusters of Orcs travelled to the Hrothgarian Mountains to live there, and Orsinium continued to grow. The Orcs got on surprisingly well, and the fall of this first Orsinium would not be due to the Orcs themselves tearing each other apart. Instead, it would fall due to the Orcs being tag teamed by the Red Guards from Hammerfell and the Bretons from High Rock, both provinces existing close by. In the 950th year of the First Era, Daggerfall and Sentinel declared war on Orsinium and undertook a siege that lasted nearly 3 decades. Eventually, they broke through the 3 special gates Torog had originally designed to keep out invaders, and soon Orsinium was done for. Between this time and the successful setup of the second Orsinium, the Orcs kept trying to rebuild, but their efforts were destroyed multiple times, far before they were close to successful. The ruins of the first Orsinium still remained, after the second Orsinium was eventually established. But before we get into that, why did the Orcs lose? What caused knights from both Hammerfell and High Rock to tear them apart? Well, the violent nature of the Orcs brought it on themselves, and it is another one of the reasons why the Orcs always lose. You see, Orsinium was considered a place ruled by savage law, filled with raiders. While Orc scholars will claim the Orcs lived peacefully, engaging in agriculture, this is only partly true. Each clan in the first Orsinium had a different role. Clans Shatul and Tumnosh provided the city's economy with farming and blacksmithing. Then there was Clan Bagrak, who committed the raids. These raids happened along the Bajulse River, which is a river running through High Rock, making up most of the border between the Bretons and Hammerfell. This is why Daggerfall and Sentinel declared war on Orsinium. These provinces may not have been fond of the Orcs, but they let them live up in the mountains, not interfering until the Orcs started to become a problem. So not only is being situated near 2 powerful provinces not the most tactful place to be, but the Orcs went on and attacked these provinces, so now we have yet another reason why the Orcs always lose. They're barbaric and not diplomatic. Their barbaric nature is found within the very culture they live in, and arguably within their very genetic structure, as seen through their innate berserker rage power. So in Orc society, relationships are actually polygamous, but don't let that fool you into thinking that everyone just partners up with whoever they want whenever they want. The Orc chieftain gets to have all the wives and father all of the children, with the other males having no right to this. This right of the chieftain, however, is earned. You see, to become chieftain, you must kill the chieftain. If you want to be the alpha male, you're going to have to defeat the chieftain in battle, and because he ends up with all the wives, all of his challengers tend to be his sons. So the chieftain gets all the wives and all the children, and his sons will grow up to become powerful, so that they can give their father an honorable death and take his place in leading the tribe. Those with the most dominance and might win. And this cultural custom ensures that a kind of natural selection plays out, and only the strongest genes are passed on. This explains why traditional Orcs are so savage in battle. Not only is it in their biology, but they've literally been brought up that way. Because of this, Orcs produce some of the most elite fighters in all of Tamriel, but it also ensures their violent ways continue, and I believe this contributes to the lack of diplomacy between them and the other provinces, and also makes them prone to more raiding. Furthermore, this highly competitive culture promotes a lot of infighting, as Orcs want to defeat other Orcs to prove their power. It's no doubt that this would make large-scale unity of the race very difficult, as things would always become unstable. So we know Orcish culture is violent and competitive, promoting fighting amongst themselves and ultimately making stability on a macro scale very difficult. We also know Orcs spread themselves very thin across the provinces, and their aggressive lifestyle even saw them attack more powerful provinces who fought back and did a lot more damage. And as I mentioned before, the Orcs had differing views because they split apart so early. These are the main reasons why the Orcs always lose. Now let's explore this more with the rise of the Second Orsinium. So in the Second Era, Orsinium was still a mess after being sieged, and it was subject to a variety of political influences. It became accepted as a territory of the Second Empire, and it was sacked by the Bretons of Shornhelm, losing its imperial status. At some point, the Hrothgarian Mountains came under control of the Daggerfall Covenant, and King Emeric of Wayrest made the Orcs still living there an offer. He said if they attacked the city of Shornhelm and provided aid to annihilate King Rance's forces at Marquast and more, then they could have the Hrothgarian Mountains for themselves. The Orcs fulfilled this under the lead of Curog Grobagrak, and this eventuated in the formation of the Second Daggerfall Covenant. Under this covenant, Curog forbade any army from Hammerfell or High Rock from entering into the Hrothgarian Mountains for any reason whatsoever. Curog knew that while they were in alliance, the Orcs and the neighbouring races had problems in the past, and things would still be tense. Curog proceeded to become the king of Orsinium and chose to rebuild the city in another location in the mountains of eastern Hrothgar, much closer to Skyrim's borders. Curog sent invitations for the mightiest warriors of Tamriel to come and help him rebuild Orsinium, and things seemed good so far. You have an alliance between the Orcs and the surrounding provinces, and you have a leader who is smart enough to ensure that these other races are not permitted inside Orc territory. Perhaps the Orcs would finally grow to become successful. Sadly, this was not the case, and the fact that the Orcs from different places had different beliefs would lead Curog to his demise. Curog was upset with the arguing between clan chiefs, and as a result he used Malakath cultists to unleash an attack on the Temple of Trinamak in his city. He then blamed the chief of Malakath worshipping clan, Bazrag Grove Farun. Bazrag was Curog's political opponent after all. Curog then had his mother lead a violent cult of Trinamak worshippers against Farun's stronghold, trying to imprison Bazrag. Gurog then had the chiefs of the other clan attend his moot, where he planned to murder them. Luckily this was learned of, and the Soulless One sided with Bazrag and helped him defeat the Orc king, rescuing some of the chiefs. Bazrag later became the new king of Orsinium and promised to continue trying to unite the Orcish people while not forcing his vision on anyone. The reason I tell this story is because it proves how, due to ideological differences, the infighting continues even when the Orcs are left amongst themselves, even with smart and capable leaders. The chiefs were arguing, this annoyed Curog, Curog plotted against them, he was then plotted against as a result, and overthrown. It's messy and no one knows if Bazrag renewed the agreement with King Emeric, because the agreement was between Emeric and Curog, not with Bazrag. Anyways, what we know is that the Second Orsinium didn't last. At some point from here onwards, the Orcs lost control of Orsinium and had to win it back. A Breton noble by the name of Lord Bowen had claimed the land, but an Orc hero named Gortwog Gronagrom disputed this claim in the Third Era, year 399. Gortwog was able to win the land by defeating Lord Bowen in a duel. Gortwog was not only a powerful warrior, but also a true visionary. He began reconstructing Orsinium where Torog had first built it, and the land prospered under his reign. He was a political mastermind and a great diplomat, characteristics that were rare among Orc leaders. We know Gortwog had made an application for Orsinium to become a recognized province of Tamriel, and this application was being reviewed by Uriel Septim VII. People thought there was a good chance Orsinium would finally be given provincial status, but no one knows if it happened before Orsinium was yet again sacked early in the Fourth Era. What we do know is that there were signs of religious conflict happening in Orsinium, as Gortwog claimed Malakath is a fake and that Trinimac should be worshipped. Obviously this caused a lot of controversy and again highlights how the varying beliefs of the Orcs can always resurface to cause issues. Anyways, back to Orsinium being sacked again. So in the early Fourth Era, following the Oblivion crisis, Orsinium was sacked by the joint forces of Hammerfell and High Rock. Two Imperial legions intervened, rescuing some of the Orc survivors and bringing them to Skyrim. Orsinium was rebuilt yet again, but instead of being constructed in the Hrothgarian Mountains, the fourth Orsinium was built in the Dragontail Mountains. This placed it between the eastern reach of Skyrim and Craglorn in Hammerfell. It is assumed to be built on the site of an Iron Orc stronghold that existed during the Second Era. And so concludes the story of the Orcs in their attempts at creating a stable province. In modern times, Orcs are still quite the outcast race, and they're considered unpleasant on the eye by many other playable races. That said, the Orcs are also known for their unyielding endurance on the battlefield, and even though they may have been so detested that they were at one point considered a goblinkin, no one would deny the strength they possess, forged in the barbaric culture they live in. They're even prized for their excellent orcish craftsmanship, and yet these powerful brutes never rose to dominance. The worst thing they ever did was split themselves apart early on in the timeline of Elder Scrolls history, as this gave them a weaker presence in all areas instead of a strong presence in one. Their differing religious beliefs then divided them further when they did try to unite, and the culture they lived under was one that promoted competition, honor, and brute strength, but on a macro scale led to instability. Also, it was especially foolish of them to attack the neighbouring provinces, who would harbour resentment towards the Orcs for centuries to come, overrunning Orsinium when the opportunity presented itself. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why the Orcs always lose. Thanks so much for watching this lore video all the way through and supporting our channel. We're learning new things about the Elder Scrolls universe every week, especially when we sift through all the comments where you guys leave even more info. If you want more videos like this and haven't subscribed, I definitely recommend and appreciate it. And if you want more of this content, give the video a like. My name is Scott, social media links can be found in the description below, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.